Want to welcome everyone to this Fine Home Building webinar, Design and Build a Pergola, sponsored by Simpson Strong Tie. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to Simpson Strong Tie for sponsoring this webinar. I'm Fine Home Building contributing editor Ian Schwant. Today I'm joined by builder Jeremy Castle, whose Fine Home Building video series How to Build a Pergola was the inspiration for this webinar. Joining us from Simpson Strong Tie are Senior Product Manager Lydia Polson and Market Segment Director Mike Wright. Today we are going to split the webinar into two focused parts. First, Lydia, Mike, and Jeremy will provide an overview of the Simpson Strong Tie Outdoor Accents decorative hardware line that Jeremy used in building his pergola. In the second half, I will interview Jeremy about his experience using this hardware and the work that he put in the video series and the subsequent article that he did for Fine Home Building. And we'll get some tips and tricks from Jeremy that he learned from using the hardware to build his pergola. I want to thank Jeremy, Lydia, Mike, Elizabeth, and Mara for joining me today. I want to thank all of you for joining us and Fine Home Building for producing this webinar and Simpson Strong Tie for sponsoring us today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lydia for our intro into the Simpson Strong Tie Outdoor Accents decorative hardware line.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a great intro, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk about the Outdoor Accents line. Ian just introduced us, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about who I am. I have been with Simpson Strong Tie for about 18 years, and a majority of that time has been in product management, both with the hardware side of it as well as the software, which we'll talk a little bit in a bit. And then Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. Really great to be here. Thanks for having us. We're excited to talk about this and join you all and talk about outdoor accents. So I've been with Simpson 21 years, and most of that time was in sales, different kind of sales capacities, being a field salesperson, working with specifiers, builders, our supply chain, and did some sales management. And a few years ago, I joined our home office to manage our market segment for residential. And in that capacity, I work a lot with sales, with product development, marketing, and engineering to identify and deliver products that our customers need.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and introduce you to Outdoor Accents. So many of you may be aware of the Simpson Strong Tie brand, just with construction and as a contractor, but most of our products are actually hidden within the walls. So several people have never heard of Simpson. What we did in 2016 is we introduced a decorative hardware line, which added beauty and strength. And so the idea here was really marketed toward the contractor, but even a DIYer that's a little bit more experienced. And we wanted to offer products for building outdoor structures. So in 2016, we launched our Mission Collection. I'm going to go into more detail on the future slides for each of these collections. Then in 2020, we introduced our Avant collection. And then just very recently, in May of this year, we launched our Sage system. Now, as I mentioned, all of these products are geared toward the contractor and DIYer, but the Sage system is really focused on the beginning level DIYer. And so we now feel like we have this full offering for different skill levels, but also different designs. So you can do anything from an easy pergola structure to a full-on pavilion with the product offering. So to date, we have over 100 products to choose from for various applications of connecting your wood. All of the outdoor accents are made with a Z-Max and a black powder coating, and that Z-Max material offers the corrosion resistance that is perfect for an outdoor solution while offering beauty. We offer these parts in both nominal and rough size lumber, and most of the parts are available in a 4x4 or 6x6, but we do have some larger sizes that offer things for up to like a 10 by 10 for your post spaces. So there is a wide variety of not only styles, but sizes. So getting into our mission collection, as you can see on this photo, this is more of a Southwestern flair style. So this is really just a style preference. We call it the mission, but we do have a wide variety of products and ranging from a post space to angles to Allen T-straps. Several of these are what Jeremy used in his build, and he'll talk more about that. But I do want to note that this also uses what we call our screw and washer combo. So in the install shot, you can see that this really offers a bolted connection, but it's actually installed with the ease of a screw. So it just kind of gives it this unique look, but it's easy to install. Our Avant collection, once again, is just another design preference. So we came out with this so that we could offer a more modern style. You can see that this is a little bit sleeker. It has the chamfered corners, but once again, we've got kind of that same product offering as far as the post spaces, different straps, and so on. Once again, these are also using that screw washer combo to give you that bolted style. Getting in a little bit deeper to the screw and washer combo, I do want to mention that these are sold separately and they are the only tested solution. So when you look at our website, or if you looked onto our catalog, you will see different load values published. And it's important that you are using only this screw washer combo in order to achieve those loads. Majority of the outdoor accents are going to be installed with our 3.5-inch screw, but we also offer a 5.5-inch screw as well. We then have what we call our essentials collection. And this is really meant to be used with either the Mission or Avant style. And this is for mainly your joist hangers, where you're adding the rafters for shade structure. And then this is where you would also find that screw and washer combo. Talking a little bit more about the Sage system. Again, this is our latest edition. And as you can see in the photo, this is really a DIY friendly pergola structure. So instead of having rafters, we do offer sunshades. And again, that's just minimal parts. So you can build a overall structure fairly quickly and very easy because you have minimal parts. The difference of these are they are all installed with our 1.5-inch connector screw opposed to the screw washer combo. And the screws are actually sold with the connector. So they're a system. It is not a kit. You purchase each part individually in different cartons and different quantities. But again, just really providing an even more DIY friendly solution so that we can provide solutions for outdoor structures. Getting into a little bit of the technical info, I mentioned earlier that the products are load rated. So this does vary across the different product styles, but a majority of them are load rated. They are tested with various lumber species, as I'm highlighting here. A lot of them are also code listed and patented, which is what really makes the Simpson outdoor products unique compared to some of the other options out in the market. And you can check the website or our catalog for the latest details or any technical information that you may need. But additionally, one of the greatest benefits of Simpson is that we also have support available. And this is live support where you can contact our 800 number and you will be connected to an actual live engineering tech rep, very knowledgeable. Anything that you may need as far as product recommendations for a certain build, or if you have questions about something that you're doing that you're unsure of, this is a fantastic resource and should absolutely be used. So I mentioned that we wanted to offer a lot of different products for all different types of projects for anything that your heart can imagine. So this is just kind of showing you some of the things that you can do. We do have products for patio covers, both attached as well as a freestanding pergola. You can build a gazebo or anything DIY that you can think of. We probably have a connector to do that. But you can also do something very simple, such as a garden bed that's shown here with just some angle connectors, adding a little decorative flair to any project. Additionally, Simpson does offer DIY project plans. These are all free and available on our website. And you can see once again that there's a variety of projects that can accommodate different skill levels. So we have things as simple as a mobile cart, but we have things that are probably going to take a little bit more experience, such as a full-on pavilion. We have a lot of different ones to choose from. I think there's about 40 and continuing to grow. So definitely check that resource out as well. And then another fantastic thing that we offer is our software. So we have a full outdoor living software suite. It includes pergola planner software, deck software, and a fence planner. Today, I'm going to highlight the pergola planner software because obviously we're talking about outdoor accents, but also because this is what Jeremy actually used to help him design his pergola that he built. Now, the great thing about this software is not only is it extremely user-friendly, but it's available for free on our website. So you can create an account, and that account is really just your login so that you can access your designs. And then we have tutorial videos that will walk you through how to use the software. And if you look on the left-hand side where the arrow is pointing, it really gives you these very easy to follow user icons. And what that is each one that you click is allowing you to design your pergola from step one all the way down to getting a project list. And so you can specify what species of lumber you want to use. You can put the size of the lumber as well as the overall size of your structure. You can select what style you want. So whether it's freestanding or attached to your home or a pavilion style, all of that is in the software. And then it, of course, is going to highlight which products you want to use. We have both Mission and Avant collection available for choice. And then at the very end, it's going to spit out a full project plan for you. So you're going to get a material list for all of your hardware and all of the fasteners, as well as a cut list for your lumber. So all you have to do is design it, and then your dream can become a reality. Additionally, one of the greatest features is you can actually upload a photo of your home to really visualize what that's going to look like in your own backyard. So you can add your home picture, a picture of the back of your house. But that's all available. And I'll let Jeremy talk a little bit about that if he wants to chime in and talk about his experience with the software.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you, Lydia, and also thank you, Ian from Fine Homebuilding, for having me here. I have to say the Pergola Planner really was extremely valuable tool for me. Um, you know, I don't use Chief Architect. I don't use Google SketchUp. I've tried to get into some of those things, and I couldn't get past I guess you could say, the learning curve. As soon as I jumped into the Pergola Planner, it was super intuitive. All these sort of like live dynamic changes on the fly were very helpful. And for me, as a small owner operator, when I think about how I use my time and the people that I sort of have in my arsenal and what they can do for me. So let's say an architect or a draftsperson. I didn't need either one of those people to get this project off the ground because everything I needed really was in this Pergola Planner software. So I think, like, from a time management perspective, it was a huge win for me. And Lydia, to your point, you said that the materials list that it creates, I mean, it's just everything was sort of put together in a spreadsheet. I could take the spreadsheet, bring the spreadsheet to my lumber yard so they could do sort of a cost for me. So I didn't actually even have to estimate it. I could take the cut list for the lumber, send it off to the sawmill for all the hemlock that we use. So I thought it was a great tool. And to be honest, I wish other people were doing this because I found it to be extremely valuable.
Great. That's really exactly what we want to hear. All righty.
Before you get back into it, Lydia, we had one question in the Q&A about attached pergolas. Did you have any more information about any of the attachment options for that style of build?
So when you're designing the attached version in the software, it's going to spec what screws you would need to attach to, like, either a ledger board or whatever attachment you're doing onto the back of your home. So there would be some information in there in the software. All
And
right.
if you'd like, I can just quickly jump in and tell you we've used this we've used this for both types of pergolas. So we've had the one that you see up on the screen right now is a freestanding pergola, but we've also used the outdoor accents for one where we did have a ledger board on the house and then
Mhm.
used essentially the concealed flange hangers. So
Yeah,
we've used both of them actually, and they've both been great.
great. I can actually go back a few slides just to show those concealed hangers again, so you guys can see those. Those are the ones he's referencing. So there they are. All righty. All right. So yeah, I mean, at this time, I'm gonna really hand it over to Jeremy again. As Ian mentioned, he's got a full article in the Fine Home Building edition. I think it's the July edition, as well as a ton of fantastic step-by-step videos. They're extremely detailed. So it's a great resource once again to kind of understand how do you build a pergola, how do you start. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Jeremy, and I'll kind of go through the slides once you're ready for me to move through them.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So you'll see here, everything sort of starts at the ground level, and you'll see in the image on the far left where we're doing the layout on top of our concrete footings, and you'll see short side, long side, and diagonal. And this is the part of the build where I believe you really, really want to take extra time. If you have extra time on a job, this is where you want to spend it, because starting with sort of a square footprint means that once you start building upward and plumb, your roof will look correct, and well, I shouldn't call it a roof, but your rafters and your purlins, your roof components, I guess you could say, um, will be square. So sort of, I guess you could say carpentry 101 is learning how to create that right angle. And we typically just call it the 3-4-5 method, but it's the Pythagorean theorem, excuse me. And the easiest way to understand it is that if you have a triangle, one leg of the triangle is 3 feet. If the other leg of the triangle is 4 feet, then the hypotenuse diagonal across, if it's 5 feet, then you have that inside angle should be 90 degrees. And so you can have help with this with construction calculators. Even an iPhone has some of the square root values and options on a calculator. But again, this is really where you want to spend as much time as possible in just being patient and making sure that your footprint is square. You'll see also on the right side where we're drilling into the top of the concrete footings with a cordless rotary hammer, and we're using dust collection, of course. Want to be careful with silica dust when you drill into concrete. So we've got a vacuum there. And then we're using a cordless half-inch drive impact wrench to secure the adjustable post base down on top of our concrete footing. So what you can see the impact wrench in my right hand, and in my left hand, I'm actually holding and securing that adjustable post base. So that actually then has a little standoff that sits in the bottom of it, and it covers the screw that's bolted down into the top of the concrete footing. And that standoff means that the bottom of your timber post, in this case we use 6x6s, is not going to sit right on concrete. And the reason for that is you don't want your wooden post to wick up any type of moisture. And all that being said, we also, just for good measure, we sealed all of the end grain on all of our lumber, just to make sure that even though we were out of the concrete, we still waxed all of our end grain. So I think that's it for that
Jeremy,
slide.
we had one
Yeah, yeah,
question on the
sure.
concrete supports from the Q&A. Barry is out in Colorado and he's wondering about if he needs to use 4x4 posts, or he would prefer to use 4x4 posts, but does he need to use the 6x6s for a 14x14 pergola? And then he also has a question in there about whether or not the concrete post supports are the best practice, or if you had any other ideas that he could use.
Sure. So we'll start with the second question, and that is, I can't say when, but mm, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, a lot of folks in our industry have really tried to get away from putting any timber in the ground. So when I first started building 20 plus years ago, if we would build a deck, we would just take a pressure treated post and just put it on the hole in the ground and cast concrete around it. And we just don't do that anymore. So we have a footing completely in the ground, and you can see here I actually chose to form up the top of our footing square. I just sort of like the look of a square top footing, which I just did with 2x4s. But we're really trying to get all of our timber above grade, just really for longevity of that timber. Even if it's pressure treated, nothing lasts forever. So we really do want to be not in the concrete, but above the concrete. So I hope that answers that question. I do consider this best practice. And then as far as a 4x4 or a 6x6, I I don't know off the top of my head. I suspect that the Pergola Planner software, you might be able to actually manipulate that choice within that software. It might give you the option 4x4 versus 6x6. We use 6x6 because we just sort of like that real chunky look. But the Pergola Planner might be able to answer that question. I
I would
think
add
go ahead, Ian. I'm sorry.
I would add for the concrete base, you could also look into using something like a helical pile, even though that might be a bit overkill for a structure like this. I'm not sure off the top of my head if something like a diamond pier actually has enough uplift and enough strength for a structure like this, but that would be something I think you'd have to look into your different options, and especially with a code enforcement official.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in on this job, the soil is extremely rocky. So the thought of getting a helical pile exactly where we want it would be, you know, wishful thinking, as I guess you could say. And I think that helical piles have their place, but I just knew that to really get this dialed in and to really get those adjustable post bases really centered on that square footing, that we would just do concrete and form them up ourselves. And I think from a structural integrity, I don't think there's anything wrong with using 4x4. I just don't know what the pergola planner will sort of spit out, so to speak.
So to add on that, the pergola planner does allow you to select 4x4 or 6x6, and I think even higher size lumber. But it will limit certain spans. So once you get to a certain span, it may not be able to generate it just based off kind of the engineering that we put behind the software. So it is a little bit limited. And then of course, it'll probably also have knee bracing that's going to be added to the design as well for certain size spans.
And Lydia, we did have another question come up about the shapes of pergolas and
Mhm.
whether or not you are limited to a square.
In the software, yes, most of it's square. We do have one that's like a 3-tier pergola. But it's basically 3 different squares, different heights. And yeah, there's no like triangle or any fancy angles or anything in there.
Would you recommend that someone who has a design for one of those reaches out directly to the customer service slide that you had posted earlier?
I think so. Yeah, I think because we would also need certain connectors that are spec'd for those angles, and they may not be part of the outdoor accents line. We don't really have any angled connectors at this point, but we can certainly customize things. We can even black powder coat some of our existing parts. So that is a special order, but we can do it.
And I would assume the square footprint also can translate easily to rectangular shapes.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to be square. I'm sorry. Yeah. All right. Did you want to talk about this one, Jeremy?
Yeah, so here you can see on the far left, we're using so I'm standing up holding a story pole or a receiver pole with a rotary laser receiver sort of right in front of my forehead. And you can see Tani, who works for me, measuring the drop from the bottom of that story pole. And so what we're doing here is, in this particular situation, we did not necessarily put the tops of our concrete footings all level to each other. They visually, the concrete footings are uniform out of the ground. So you see roughly 3.5 or 4 inches of concrete coming out of the ground. But what that means is we had to, because we wanted a level beam and rafter system, figure out what the difference was between all of those concrete footings. So after we squared everything up, we put all of our adjustable post bases on. And then once they were bolted down in the locations that we wanted, then we had to figure out how long all of the 6x6 vertical posts needed to be. And so to do that, we used a rotary laser. And there's multiple different ways to use a rotary laser. This is the method that we're showing is one method. There are other methods. You can simply put the bottom of that story pole on top of the adjustable post base and then slide the receiver up and down and then record the measurements off of that story pole or receiver pole. But this is just the way that we did it. And then you can see using a circular saw to make the cuts, finishing the cut with a reciprocating saw, sealing the end grain of our hemlock with emulsified wax. It's a product called Anchor Seal. I highly, highly, highly suggest you seal all of your end cuts in any of your lumber, whether it's pressure treated lumber and treating your end cuts with copper naphthenate, or in this case, the hemlock is just a natural untreated product. So we did wax our end grain. And then moving down, you could see sort of in the center on the bottom, we're just checking to make sure that things are plumb. And in the background of that particular picture, you can see we just have some 2x4 bracing to hold them plumb. And then once they were plumb and where we wanted them, on the bottom right, you can see just use an impact driver to drive the structural screws with those hex head washers.
Sorry. There we go.
So here you see, you can choose. So getting back to the pergola planner, if I remember correctly, Lydia, you can sort of choose the beam tail or rafter tail detail on how you want that to look. And we just sort of took inspiration from what I consider like a clipped corner or a 45-degree corner. I don't know like the industry term for this, to be honest, but just visually that's what we like. And it's very easy to sort of make repeatable cuts with that. Just personally, I like to sort of stay away from scrolling details. Personally, it's not my thing. And this is much easier to cut with a circular saw. So you'll see we had we'll call it a template beam, and stack it on top of our other beam material. And then after everything's traced out, cut it. You can see we're installing in sort of the middle. In that middle left, we're installing what I would say is like the outer ply of a 2-ply beam. Now that 2-ply beam you can see in the top right photograph is not a plied beam where it's actually fastened together. It's applied to the sides of that vertical 6x6 post, and it's held in place with a decorative joist tie. But you can see the rafters, which sit over the top of that beam, and you can also see that in the bottom photograph, they share that same clipped corner detail. And again, it's to make those cuts, very easy, very repeatable. Just use a circular saw. And then, of course, thinking about how you use your material and how you use your lumber stock, really trying to take all of the most visually appearing, the lumber with the best visual appearance, and giving that sort of making sure that's facing outward. And if you have stuff with maybe knots, or this is hemlock, it might have some checks in it, maybe putting those more to the inside. Making sure we use our straightest stock for our beams, and if there's anything that's less straight, we would use those for our rafters. So just in sort of thinking through the job, how are you using your material, sorting through your material, and the best use of that material.
Great.
So you can see on the left there, the knee bracing. Those are 6x6s. They are held in place on the left. You can see I'm fastening the bottom of that knee bracing to the side of one of the vertical 6x6 posts. We really just used some of the longer structural screws there. One little tip or trick I could tell you is, and I don't know exactly how the diameter of those structural screw heads, maybe 5/8 or 3/4, is we took a little Forstner bit and we put a little round recess in the side of that knee brace where that structural screw was going to go. So that way, when we drove the screw, it would seat in just a little round recess. So we didn't get any mushrooming of the wood. If you overdrive it, it's just going to further sort of seat in that little round circle that you've made with that Forstner bit. You could use a decorative washer there if you wanted. But we just use just the screw. You can see above my head there, we have a quick clamp. Quick clamps are great. Typically you think of carpenter or cabinet guys using them to hold cabinets together, but we use quick clamps for framing all the time, for spreading things apart, pulling things together, third hand, that sort of thing. And the picture adjacent to that, you can see Tanya's putting in a structural screw over a decorative washer and a hex head washer, tying in the side of one of those outer plies of the beam to hold the top of that knee brace in place. And then on the right there, you can see we topped everything off with just 2x2 hemlock purlins. And we let those run wild down the sides. And then we came back through and snapped a chalk line, and then cut everything off nice and straight. And there you can see in the bottom right, we just fastened the top of those purlins down to the top of the rafters with I call it a deck screw. Forgive me, I don't remember what Simpson calls them, but it's like it's not quite as I would say a little bit beefier than a deck screw, but smaller than a structural screw.
I can't think of what the SKU name is, but yeah, it's probably what was spec'd in the software, which is our deck screw.
Yeah. Now you could use a 90-degree angle there, but we just went right down to the top. And another little tip or trick here is you can see all of those purlins are 8 inches on center across the tops of those rafters. When those rafters were all cut sitting on sawhorses, what we did was we ganged them all together and we flushed up the ends, and we did the 8-inch on center layout when all of those rafters were on sawhorses at ground level. So that way, when we got up onto the top of the structure, we didn't have to snap any lines. We didn't have to do any layout work. It was all done, on the ground, safe, sawhorses, much easier and much safer. So then when we got up on top, everything was laid out. We just had to fasten it.
Yeah, and I think you have all that detail in your video as well. Again, the videos are super helpful. You go into every detail, so it's definitely worth a watch on those.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up kind of what we had to share today. And now we are certainly open for the Q&A. As we mentioned, we've got myself, we've got Jeremy who used the product, and then we've got market segment, marketing, engineering. So we're all here.
Jeremy, one of the questions that we had went back to the concrete, and DK is wondering what depth you had to go to for that footing, and if it was the same requirement as the adjacent house foundation, which I'm going to guess in upstate New York, I hope you did not have to go that far down.
So just in best practice here, what we did go down 48 inches, which in upstate New York, that's sort of standard for getting down below frost line. Really, at the end of the day, it's best to just check with your local building department. They might say, hey, it's just a pergola. You don't have to go 48 inches below grade. So I would really say that the best thing to do is engage the building department, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that say yay or nay. And then, of course, I don't think my house is a good example because I have an 1880s farmhouse that is definitely not built below frost line.
So DK just said you're an overachiever. One of the things that comes up for me often with building inspectors is that they like to see when you're using an entire system of products. I think that's what Simpson's, not just this particular product line, but a lot of your product lines excel in that. And I've found now with our framing hardware that they want to see us using your fasteners with your products specifically, and they are calling out when people would mix different fasteners with different metal connectors. So I think that's, if there's one takeaway from the building world that I would want you to take away from this, is lean on your code enforcement officials to help you spec the products and try to use an entire system and not do a mix and match.
I would agree with that. And I think Simpson is just so prolific in our industry, that it's available everywhere. Lumber yards, the box stores, and to your point, just sort of sticking to one thing in particular that the building departments are familiar with. And by and large, they're all familiar with the Simpson stuff.
So a couple of questions that we've had pop up were ones that I was expecting. A lot of them are centered on how do you connect a pergola to a house with this hardware? Do you have to branch out into different methodology and different hardware offerings from Simpson to do that?
So I don't know if Mara can answer that. I do know that to attach the ledger board, we do have certain screws that need to be used. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but Mara may have an answer.
I don't have that answer off the top of my head.
Mike?
We're talking about in attachment to the house. So we do get a lot of requests for this. The only one that we could really provide some guidance on is if you were to use a ledger. There are attachment options out in the market for attaching like on top of the roof. I see we have a question in the chat or Q&A for that. At this time, we don't have a solution for that. We do get a lot of questions for that. And you never know, we might have something like that in the future, because that is an application that is growing in popularity that we're seeing.
Do you know which screw though, Mike, for attaching the ledger board? Do you know? I feel like there's a standard one that we typically use.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of options. I think the SDWS timber screw is probably the go-to option. It has a flat head, which allows you to it minimizes like interference with some of like joist hangers and other hardware, or even deck joists or pergola roof joists that are coming into it. There are also hex head options, and there's even options for attaching to concrete and masonry like the Titan HD. So there are multiple options for ledger attachment, but the SDWS timber screw would probably be the go-to for a wood-to-wood connection, which we can post in the chat here.
Thank you.
So Jeremy, what was a takeaway that you had from the first time you got your hands on the hardware and got a chance to use it?
The first time I think I was trying to remember, I think was back in 2017. And um, everybody loved it. We loved it as installers. The homeowner loved it because it was just an alternative to using, just like what I would consider a more just a plain structural connector, which to be honest, in the past we've taken them and we've tried to spray paint them if they've been visible. So this was just a great option. I can tell you part of the learning curve back in 2017 was we built a pergola that was connected to the home. So we did have a ledger board up against the home. I wish I remember what we used to attach that ledger to the home, and I just don't. I apologize. But we did use one of the black concealed joist hangers up on that ledger, and then put the hemlock, we'll call it the rafter, into that joist hanger. Now, the joist hanger was sized for dimensional lumber, and our hemlock from a sawmill came as what we could call like rough sawn sizing. So instead of let's say a 2x10 in dimensional lumber or planed lumber sizing would be 1.5 by 9.25. This was more like 1.75 or a full 2 inch by maybe 9.75 or a full 10 inches. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there, and maybe, to be honest, almost a little bit of an oops moment. So we had to really nicely plane all of the ends of our rafters to fit into those connectors. Now, I think Lydia mentioned that there are options within the line of sort of planed or dimensional sizing versus rough sawn sizing. But I mean, like, getting back to the question back in 2017, we all loved it. There was just that small little bit of learning curve for using it, but it's great.
So Jeremy, one of the times you and I spoke on the phone about this, you and I nerded out a little bit on stock prep and hemlock from the fine people at Ghent Wood Products, where I
Mhm.
pretty quickly called out where you got it. Uh, it- was there anything specific that you did or that you had the mill do with that hemlock to get it ready for this project?
Yeah, so good question. So first and foremost, I made sure that everything that they sent was sent as planed or surfaced dimensional lumber sizing. It's just what we're most comfortable with, you know, getting our hands on the outdoor accents lineup. It's easier for us to get the hardware for those dimensional sizes. So first and foremost, I made sure that they would send the hemlock as dimensional lumber sizing, not rough sawn lumber sizing. Um, One of the things to know about working with a sawmill is that they often, let's say you ask for a 10-foot 6x6, they often will send something that's longer than 10 feet. And when I say longer, I don't even mean 10-foot one. I mean, it might be 10-foot 6, it might be 10-foot 9. And that's nice because when you're working with something like hemlock, it sort of gives you the ability to figure out, okay, where's the best 6-foot and 4-foot section of that 10? Or in some situations, again, 10-6, 10-9. One thing to think about when working with hemlock in particular is that it can be prone to, I think it's called ring shake. So just understanding what ring shake is and maybe even purchasing more than you need, especially if you have a special order like hemlock takes 2 to 3 weeks to get this time of year, is just ordering more than you need. Maybe they spear it with a forklift and you lose the edge of something, or maybe you just don't like the way something looks, or maybe something's terribly crooked, is that especially on special order stuff, we always over order. And typically that's a smart idea because we end up using really everything.
Do you do any other stock prep to it, like round the edges of any of the product or ease the edges? I know you said you're not a big scroll kind of guy, but was there anything like that that you did that might help lengthen the life of the
Yeah,
product?
yes, thank you for reminding me actually. Um, we talked about sealing all of our end cuts. Every single cross cut that we made on this material got treated with emulsified wax. Whether it was close to the ground or not, we sealed all of our end grain. Anything that you could put your hand on or near. So our vertical 6x6 posts and our 6x6 knee bracing, we put an eased edge on all of the corners of it. Because when it comes from the mill, even though it's planed, um, as plain lumber, they don't ease the edge at the mill like you would see on, 2x framing material from a lumber yard or a box store. So I made sure to ease all of the edges. Um, I don't even, maybe we did a little bit of sanding. I don't think we had to do a lot of sanding. Trying to think what other stock prep we did. Um, I can say that where the 6x6 knee braces are attached to the sides of the vertical 6x6 posts, you can picture a really big 45-degree cut on a 45-degree cut on that knee brace. Well, when you're working with some of this material, even if you've got a big circular saw, getting really nice, precise 45-degree cuts on some of this material is tough. It's not always super square from the mill, the material. So I clipped off sort of the point that rests against the vertical 6x6. I clipped just a half inch off of it. So it almost has like a half inch heel on the bottom of that knee brace. And I don't know if that's if you can see that, but that just sort of takes away the need to be super, super precise. I mean, I call this finished framing. You're framing, but it's finished material. So anything you can do to kind of take your eye away from some of those irregularities from the mill.
What was that wax product you mentioned again?
Yep. It's called Anchor Seal. It's so anchor like a boat anchor, Anchor, and then seal like you're sealing something up, SEAL. And I think we can get it at our local lumber yard. It's an emulsified wax, so it's almost like paste when it's in the quart. Just put it on with a cheap chip brush, and it just turns into a hard wax. And it goes a long way. You don't have to use a ton of it for it to be effective. I will say this though, really keep it only on the end grain because if you get any of that wax on, we'll say the face or the side of the board, it could yellow the board. So really be careful to really just keep it on the end grain where you won't see it.
You mentioned large frames circular saw, but is there any other tools like specific drills or a type of driver tip that you like for using this hardware?
Yeah, so it in this project we just used just a regular um impact driver. Um I've started to get a little away from using an impact driver for some of the larger structural screws, the 3.5 and 5.5, and will actually oftentimes use an impact wrench just to sort of preserve my impact driver, so to speak. But one thing I can say is that I would say if you're a DIYer or a homeowner doing this project, maybe newer to construction, is really to invest in good, what I call prosumer tools. So, you don't have to go out and spend big bucks on, German made woodworking tools. But when I say prosumer, I mean, you know, Makita, DeWalt, Milwaukee, Bosch, Rigid. I mean, these tools, They don't cost a ton of money. You can buy them at hardware stores, box stores, lumber yards, and they're going to be better for a project like this. They're going to last longer. You're going to get better runtime on your batteries. And they're just going to be so much more enjoyable to use than maybe a price point brand.
It definitely gets in my head when I think about being in the upper Midwest, where I see a lot of these uh, pergolas made out of rough sawn white oak that somebody might have felled themselves and had milled up into beams, or something. Maybe somebody took a barn apart and is making a pergola out of old barn beams. But that stuff can be incredibly difficult to not just cut, but put hardware like these screws into. So I think that's great advice from you, Jeremy.
Yeah, and I can say that with the outdoor accents, the structural screws, so the bigger, the 3.5s and the 5.5s, we didn't pre-drill anything. Aside from that small recess for the head of the structural screws with a Forstner bit, we didn't pre-drill anything. We just used an impact driver, and it drove very, very easily and exactly where we wanted it to. I would say, Ian, to your point, if you're using something that's old, dry, you said white oak. I would say if you were gonna go to the extreme and use something like locust, I would definitely suggest pre-drilling, just because that stuff is so hard.
So, Jeremy, I think I wanted to close with getting into some of the building department and code stuff that you and I have talked about with this project. What beyond the just sticking to a system advice do you have for somebody when they're working with their code enforcement official?
So it's a great question, and I always like to just be, I guess you could say, proactive versus reactive. And so anytime I have a question that I don't have an answer to, I literally just pick up the phone and I call the building department and I say, this is what I want to use. Can we use it? Or what do you want to see here? Um, and I don't even mean specifically with the outdoor accents line. I just mean building in general. Um, is that just setting that expectation and being proactive and building that relationship with the building department so that they don't come to the job and say, pump the brakes. We didn't know you were going to use X, Y, and Z. So really setting the early expectations and creating that relationship before you start the job, I think is really the way to go. I think it'll really mitigate any headaches down the road.
Yeah,
Well,
I like that answer because, and I like that advice, I should say, is because in fact we've got a couple of questions in the queue that I think that's where you start. One is about like roof cladding on a pergola. It depends on the material, and I think it depends on the system, and it depends on your local jurisdiction. And same thing goes with what strength concrete for post bases. With your soil conditions and local requirements, I think that's the best place to start first.
anything else, Jeremy, that comes to mind that you want to make sure people walk away from, or walk away from here with? I think getting into encouraging people to try that pergola planner, I think, is a great place to start. Uh, you spoke volumes of it in a lot of our pre-calls, Jeremy, for how much that helped you out in the design work.
Yeah, I think I don't have a ton to add. I mean, something that I wrote in the article, and I briefly touched on this earlier, was that visually, when you look at the base of this pergola, again, you see a uniform amount of concrete coming out of the ground. One thought is to maybe take the time, if you would like, to think more about site prep and understanding and thinking about what your finished grade or your finished maybe patio or flooring material is going to be underneath the pergola. Because if you think, hey, we're going to have a brick paver patio, well, you're going to need to spend more time really prepping and leveling and doing more site work before you even start building the pergola itself, before you get into the carpentry aspect, you're going to want to think 10 steps ahead for what finished grade is going to be, what the finished materials on that, at grade. For this job, it was a little bit more simple. The quote unquote patio underneath is literally just stone dust. We just took stone dust and we raked it out and flattened it and watered it, and we just sort of have this hard, sort of natural, earthy, I'll call it a patio in air quotes, um, underneath. And maybe if you just have grass, then there's even less prep work or site work. So I think really thinking ahead of what's going to be underneath that pergola and how you're going to use the space, to think about how much prep work you're going to have.
I think that's a great piece of advice to end on. Lydia or Mike, do you have anything else that you want to add about the hardware system?
I don't have anything to add. I just want to thank Jeremy again for sharing his experience using our products. And we can also put the link for the Pergola Planner software in the chat. And yeah, I encourage you guys to check that out. Check out the DIY project plans, our full product offering. And yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great system, and we got to do a little bit of everything, the article, the videos, the webinar. So it was great. Thank you all.
At that, I want to thank Jeremy, Lydia, Mike, Elizabeth, and Mara for joining me today. I want to thank Simpson Strong Tie for sponsoring this Fine Home Building webinar. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and taking in this information with us.